Okay. Well, let me start by welcoming everyone. We're so glad that you could all share some of your time with us today. My name is Angie Bailius. I'm the outreach librarian here at Sims Library. We are recording today's presentation, and we will post it to our Green Talks guide. You should have received a link to that in the email I sent this morning, or you can also get to it by going to our library homepage, click on the Research Guide tab, and search for Green Talks. Just a reminder, please mute your mics until the end. We'll have a question and answer period. And now I want to pitch it over to my friend Alejandro Martinez from the Sustainability Center.
Hi, everybody. My name is Alejandro Martinez. I'm the Sustainability Manager from Southeastern. This is the third year we are doing our Green Talks. We have been talking about different things about recycle, renewable energies, green business, wetlands conservation, just to name a few of them. And today we have our amazing professor, Dr. David Burley, who is going to be speaking about the mighty Yosemite. So, yeah, we are excited about this. So, Dr. Burley, it's all yours.
Thank you, Alejandro and Angie. You guys are doing a great job. Thank you for having me back. I think this is my third one, if I'm not mistaken. And you guys have done a great job, really promoting this series over the past 3 years. So thank you for having me. And it's always a good time. And we got a lot of folks logged on here. I was a little bit skeptical, right? It's not in person. Everything's new, the new normal. But it looks like we got some pretty good interest. So that's another testament to Angie at the library and Alejandro at the Sustainability Center. So today I'm going to talk about Yosemite National Park, and I'm going to put that in the context of a Study Away program that I'm organizing for late May and early June of 2021. So I'm going to try to keep it to about 20 minutes. Hopefully we'll see. So we can have a little Q&A. And I'll start off with a little just in general intro to national parks, then talking about how that came into an idea for a Study Away program, and then, what the program actually entails. So, even though we have a couple of places that are managed by the National Park Service down here in Louisiana, we don't have any of the iconic national parks. And so a lot of us are sort of unfamiliar with national parks and what they mean and how they're differentiated, or even but most of us don't even know that they're different from any other public land. Our national parks came into existence. The first one was created in 1890 in Yellowstone. Yosemite came a few years later, and it wasn't until almost 30 years later, almost 26 years later, that we actually got the National Park Service, which was an arm of the federal government that was created to manage and protect these places. And we were the national parks are often called America's best idea. I don't know if anybody saw the Ken Burns docuseries on PBS several years ago in 2016 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of or I think it was actually 2014. Yeah, before that. But a great series. If you have the chance to look it up on any of the streaming platforms or PBS streaming, it's really, really incredible. Anyway, but America's best idea. And people have called it that. Historians, wildlife historians, conservationists have called it that because it's sort of embodies brings to full fruition the principles of democracy, and that is that we took a piece of land and said, this is really special, this is really unique, this is really something that everyone should have access to, and that it should belong to all of us. So before we came up with this idea with the first national park in Yellowstone, for a piece of land to be public, it took a rich person to buy it, set it aside, and give it to said government, right? So societies, mostly in Europe, relied on rich people to sort of grant them public lands. Well, we were the first nation to say, you know what, we shouldn't have to rely on the generosity of the wealthy, right? That we should be, in this sort of democracy, we should be able to point out what's special and then be able to make it available to everybody. These places belong to us, right? So we have the iconic national parks, and which there are actually 58 with that actual designation. Other things, so if you think about Jean Lafitte in the Barataria Basin down here south of New Orleans, right? That's a national, it's managed by the National Park Service, but it's not an actual national park. It's a national historic monument, right? So technical difference, but nonetheless a difference. And that has different legal meanings as well. But anyway, Yosemite, the Grand Canyon, Rocky Mountain National Park, Grand Teton, name mostly in the West, Denali in Alaska, the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in Tennessee, and the border of North Carolina, right? All those national parks are the part of the 58 iconic national parks. So with that, and then with the advent of the automobile, people started visiting national parks en masse, right? And another phrase that's also often used about our national parks is that they're loved to death, right? Our national parks are loved to death. People all around the world go to national parks. We used to, when my child was younger, he's 8 now, just turned 8 a week ago. But when he was younger, we'd say he's getting all of his international experience from going to national parks, because we'd be at campgrounds and there'd be people from France and Germany and Japan and Indonesia and all these places, because people just love to visit our national parks, right? Even in other countries, their landscape is not as diverse and unique as much of the ecology and landscape we have in the Western, especially in the Western United States. In addition to that, Americans love to visit our national parks, and we probably all heard the stories over the summer, right, of people getting the idea because of COVID, right? Well, we know where we can go and be by ourselves and socially distanced. We're going to go to a national park. Well, it seems everybody else had that idea too. So RV sales started going through the roof, and RV rentals. So the National Park Service, their mandate through the act that created the National Park Service, mandates the National Park Service to manage and preserve these places, but also make them available to future generations, right, and to present ones. So there's that that creates a struggle in and of itself, right? How do you preserve these places in their natural integrity, but also make them available to the all the people, especially the Americans who they belong to? How do you make them available to them without compromising these places for future generations? So out of that, grew my idea to organize some study away programs instead of study abroad. I thought, well, we had these, and I had taken 2 study abroad classes to Cuba before this. I thought, what about domestic? Study away instead of study abroad. How about we take some students and go to some of these iconic places and experience them? And I couldn't, and I could have easily done, say, let's go to Canada, to Jasper National Park or Banff National Park, which are incredible, places and just incredibly unique. But I felt compelled, since we were the first nation to come up with national parks, it was like, okay, no, this has to stay here. So, I got this idea, and for 2018 and 2019, I organized 2 classes to go to Zion National Park in southern Utah. And I also thought that, since we don't have many national parks down here in Louisiana, it's not like people who live in California or Alaska or Colorado or Wyoming or Utah, who has 5 national parks. We don't really know a lot about national parks or public lands, right? What's the difference between a national forest and a national park? What's the difference between national wildlife reserve and a national park, a national monument and a national park? So I thought this was, since I'm an environmental sociologist and I teach classes in that area, I thought, one of the things that we should know about is what are these different land designations and what do they mean? For example, in national forests, right, all sorts of resource extraction is allowed. So the government manages these places, but protection isn't their priority, right? It's recreation, but it's also mining of minerals, logging, oil and gas extraction. Many of the national forests in the West are rented out to ski companies. So there'll be lots of skiing on national forest areas, but not national parks, right? National parks are there's no hunting, no resource extraction, no impingement on the land, except to do things that will cater to allowing people to visit, right? And that's a little sticky as well, right? So anyway, so we did Zion for 2018 and 2019. I was planning to go to Zion again for 2020. We had several students signed up, but the whole world changed in mid-March. And so that trip got canceled. And so for this year, or for 2021, I decided to retool the program and to go someplace new, to try something different, right? And Yosemite being one of the iconic parks and probably one in my top 2 or 3 national parks, and being in California, I thought that'd be a great place to go, and for many reasons, which I'll get into. Also, for these national parks, they're called gateway towns. So, for example, in Zion, right outside the main entrance in Zion National Park in southern Utah is the tiny town of Springdale, right? Now, Zion is always either number 2 or number 3 in competition with Yosemite as being the most visited park in the U.S. Of course, the most visited is Great Smoky Mountains, and that's largely due to its proximity to the eastern seaboard and how dense the population is along the East Coast. So it's easily accessible by millions. The West is much more spread out, but still Zion gets 4.6 million visitors a year, and that's mostly in the summer. So for that town of Springdale, right, the park is their economic lifeline, right? Without the park and the tourism that occurs, they don't, Springdale does not exist. At the same time, every summer, they get about 4 million people, right? In a town that the rest of the year is at a population of 550. So you can imagine the strain on resources and the just strain on services that puts, especially when you have hotels that are coming in, wanting to buy up land, build on land, raising the cost of living, right, for a lot of people. And the next town is over 75 miles away, right? So if you can't afford to live in Springdale anymore, you got to go to St. George, right? And then you have to, and if you work in Springdale at a hotel or a restaurant or at a recreation company, then that really puts a strain on your life, right? And people want to stay in Springdale. It's their town, right? So again, we see that struggle, and how do the town managers, the mayor, the city council, how do they manage these issues? So that's also something that was profoundly interesting. And how do we learn about those issues and how these different places are dealing with them, right? So our urban planning, community development becomes an avenue for learning these places. Before the trip, right, we read a bunch of, we dive into the literature, right, that's related to national parks. We read a piece by Edward Abbey, which Jessica will be very familiar with, about how much, who was a national forest ranger actually in the early 1960s. And he wrote about, how much access should we really create for people? He didn't even think we should have roads, streets, or automobiles into national parks. He thought, look, if you can't get there under your own steam, meaning hiking or bicycling, then you shouldn't be visiting a national park. All right. So, we struggle over those issues, right? We talk about very, very modern issues, and we read material on threats to national parks and national other public lands. So in 2016, when President Trump came into office, under his EPA and the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, which is the large organization that oversees a lot of our public lands, he took the National Monument designation away from Bears Ears National Monument in southern Utah, as well as reduced Grand Escalante National Monument by up to 50%. And Grand Escalante is the large area in southern Utah that also encompasses Zion, Bryce Canyon, Canyonlands National Parks, Capitol Reef, and Arches National Parks. It would take an act of Congress to take a national parks designation away, but those things, we don't even know actually if it's legal if he does that. No other president in history has tried to take away a public land designation from any public land. Usually this is sort of standard practice. A president, especially in his last year of office, any president, Republican, Democrat, what have you, will, it's part of their legacy. They designate some waters or some land as public, usually national monuments. That's the first step created by Teddy Roosevelt, the great conservationist. And that national monument status is the first step for a piece of land to become a national park. And national monuments don't require Congress. They would just require the act of a sitting president. So usually every incoming president respects the wishes and the public land designations of prior presidents. This has never been done before, what President Trump did when he came into office in 2017, taking away the public land designation. So of course, that is still wrapped up in the courts. And since it's never been done before, we're not even sure that it's constitutional, but it's taking a long time to sit through the courts. But effective, it's still in effect. Taking away those land designations is still in effect while it goes through the courts. Obama designated Bears Ears National Monument in southern Utah in his last year in office at the continued request of many Native American tribes who wanted that land set aside and not to be drilled on. By taking away that status, that opens these lands up for exploration and potential resource extraction. So we have, so we struggle with those issues and learn about those things and talk about them, right? And even if here's the thing for, say, like Zion, right? Even if you don't do any resource extraction and keep the national park status for a place like Zion, if you open up Grand Escalante, which encompasses Zion, and you do any logging, drilling for copper, mining for oil and gas, even 100 miles away, that's going to affect the larger ecosystem and cause all sorts of pollution and air pollution because the air doesn't stay in one spot, does it? It can go into and it will contaminate these places, especially, and as well as downstream fish issues and things like that. So, and now, just very recently, just in the past month, they've looked to open up the Tongass National Forest to logging. And Tongass National Forest in Alaska is under a roadless rule, is also considered a national wildlife refuge. And it's home to some of the last virgin forests in the United States. And that would, of course, open that up to timber interests and doing away with some of our last virgin forests, old growth. And then you have how the national parks have dealt with COVID, right? And each park was different. And over this past summer, many parks instituted a reservation system. For example, my family and I visited Rocky Mountain National Park over the summer, and what they had all their visitor centers shut down because those places tend to be where lots and lots of people congregate and would make it very hard to do any social distancing. And what they did is Rocky Mountain National Park, on a daily basis in the summer, they averaged 4,000 vehicles a day entering the park. They cut it down to 2,000, and you had to have a reservation that you got online or by phone before you got there. So you could pull up, they only were giving out 2,000 per day, and before you got there, you would have to get your reservation, pay your small fee, and then present it at the entrance station. If you had campground reservations like we did, that would get you into the park, and that would serve as your pass. So a lot of parks, most of the parks were shut down until mid-June, I think it was. So they in each park did something different. Another thing, especially and with Yosemite, we're dealing with wildfires. They're just opening up this week. They've been shut down for the past couple of months because of the wildfires, right? So that opens up a whole nother opportunity for learning. And we'll be diving into that. While we are in Yosemite, we'll be meeting with rangers and learning from rangers on all sorts of topics, right? And this is just another thing most of us don't think about when we think about national parks. They have rangers that oversee departments on sustainability initiatives. They have rangers that oversee departments on community and engagement, on education and outreach, on managing wildlife, on managing flora, on law enforcement. One thing I learned while we were in Zion, I ran into a law enforcement ranger at a coffee shop in the gateway town of Springdale, and I just started talking to him, and he told me that, because of they get so many visitors, right? And they get so many calls from people who get stuck and stranded on the hiking trails because they've never hiked before, they're not prepared, they don't have enough water, one thing or another, they sprain an ankle, so they have to respond to those calls. Meanwhile, they're getting lots of calls about defamation of cultural and archaeological sites, or people poaching archaeological finds that are in the park, and that's a federal offense, right? These things are our heritage, right? The park protects them, but because they get so many calls on all these on visitor issues, they don't have the people power, they don't have the staff to respond to any of those calls in the summertime. And then we get into a funding issue, right? The federal government is responsible for allocating funds to the national parks, but there's a backlog of national parks maintenance projects, and across the national parks, it's at $5 billion. Right? So there are lots of things that the national parks that need to do, including staffing, that they're just not able to do because of funding. So while in Yosemite, we meet with rangers about we'll meet with rangers about these issues. We'll be taken on a tour, a guided tour by the Yosemite Conservancy. Since the parks are always underfunded, each park usually has a nonprofit citizen group that supports the park in what they do. Zion has their Zion Forever project. That's their nonprofit that helps support them and their projects. Yosemite has the Yosemite Conservancy. So they'll take us on a guided tour, and we'll learn a lot about the ecosystem, as well as the human habitation of the national parks of Yosemite. We'll do a service project where a ranger or a volunteer will educate us about pollution in the park, and we'll clean up. One of the projects is we'll clean up litter on a trail, or we'll help remove an invasive species of plant that they're trying to eradicate. It could be any of those things. When we're there, I want students to learn the value of giving back, right? These are our places, and we need to be able to take care of them. We'll visit some of the museums, right? They have a bunch of museums in the valley, the main visitor portion of the Yosemite National Park, and we'll we'll learn about the human history of the park, Native American settlement and Native American occupation of that area over the past few thousand years, as well as European settlement of that area, and finally its protection as a national park by the famous conservationist spearheaded by John Muir. We'll go on some amazing hikes. And you know what I forgot to do while I'm talking my darn head off? I forgot to do this presentation. So as I finish this up and wrap this up, I'm going to put on this slideshow that you can see. I need to do present now. Sorry about that, guys. Okay. So we'll go on some amazing hikes into some of the best places in the park. And students will also have a lot of time to explore on their own. What I really want is for, these places offer the amazing, they offer something that is almost hard to put into words, right? The wonder of these places, the wonder of the solitude that we can experience in these places, the chance for spiritual reflection, restoration of the spirit, so to speak. So I set aside at least a whole day and many afternoons for students to be able to explore on their own. And students also do a project that they incorporate into their final paper, where they survey some of the visitors. So they each have to do some brief interviews with visitors, and it is to gauge the purpose is to gauge their knowledge of threats to public parks. My premise is that I think most Americans think about national parks as being static. Grand Canyon is there, it's going to stay just like it is, and that's it. Yosemite is there, it's going to stay like it is, that's it. Yellowstone is there, and that's it. We don't think about these places being threatened by things. So what their interview does is they pick 5 random people who will willfully be interviewed, and it only takes about 5 minutes. And they start off with, how long have you been here? What's been the most fun thing you've done so far? How long are you staying? Then they ask them, it's only about 7 or 8 questions. Then they ask them, are you aware of any threats to public lands, right? And then the respondent, yes, no, I don't know. And then they say, do you think we need more public lands? And and then they ask, well, they end with, do issues with national parks or any other public lands influence how you vote, right? So trying to, seeing if people make those connections between these places and the impact that their voting behavior has, and if it drives their voting behavior at all, right? And we get some students, at least in the 2 years we did it in Yosemite, have some very interesting feedback from people. So, that's my spiel on this issue, and I'd love to hear any feedback or get any questions.
Well, I have a comment to make. You were mentioning Ken Burns and his 6-part film about the national parks. We have that in our Films on Demand collection here at Sam's Library. And I have it linked in the Green Talks guide that you have a link to it in the email from today. And then you can also get to it from the library homepage by clicking on research guides and then just search for Green Talks.
Oh, that's fantastic. So we can stream it. Is that right, Angie?
That's right.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And one other thing before y'all start your, hopefully we have some questions and some discussion. A very dear friend of mine and colleague over at the University of Southern Mississippi is having a very interesting talk tomorrow on the Deepwater Horizon spill. This is the 10th anniversary of that disaster. They're going to talk about from the ecological catastrophe to the scientific opportunity. And it's tomorrow at 6 o'clock. And I can forward this email to you if you're interested. So if you want to just reply to the email I sent you this morning, I'll send you this information to the USM talk tomorrow.
Oh, that'd be great. I'd be interested in that.
Well, I'll just send it to everyone. That way you don't have to bother.
Okay. Thank you, Angie.
You will all have it. Now, questions, everyone?
I really enjoyed the presentation of Dr. Burley. I actually have the opportunity to visit 6 national parks in January, and I visited the White Sands in New Mexico, and I was wondering how, when I was there, that week is when it became a national park, and I was wondering how a piece of land or like a state park become a national park. So it was really interesting, and of course, I got my annual pass, national park, something like we are doing as a honeymoon with my wife. We're planning to visit 3 national parks. So I think it's very interesting, and it's just such a good opportunity. Like we can do this in America and enjoy these beautiful places. So I really learned a lot today for this.
Okay.
What 3 parks are you going to next, Alejandro?
Say again, sir?
What 3 parks are you going to next? You said you were going to three more parks with your new wife?
Yeah, so we're going to go to Joshua Tree National Park, and then we're going to drive all the way to Yosemite and to Yellowstone. And we might go all the way to Glacier National. I don't know if we will have time to go all the way to Glacier. We will try.
Mm-hmm.
Depending if the weather is not too bad.
Yes. I'm envious. It sounds great.
Oh.
Okay. Any other questions? Comments?
I have a comment.
Oh, please.
I just want to say I went on the Zion trip, and I just want to say it was a really great experience, and it was a time of a lot of like spiritual restoration and exploration. And it was a little scary to interview people, but most of them were nice.
Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah, Jessica was in on the first trip we did there, and it was a special group too. There was for me, the opportunity to bond with students, and and I can say that that was a special group, and to be able to bond with it's usually some of the best students who apply to these things, because they feel, they have that passion, that inner drive, that curiosity, so yeah, Jessica was part of a great group, and man, and we'd have dinner at night after a long day, and they would just they would be picking each other's brains, and I would kind of enjoy just sitting back and watching them just go, and it was a great time.
Well, it sounds like an amazing experience. We are so grateful for your presentation today and for your partnership in the Green Talk series. Every time you present, we learn so much and we get so fired up about environmental issues. So thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for joining. We really appreciate it. We'll be in touch when we have another Green Talk scheduled. So we'll sign off for now, and we hope to see you all real soon.
Thanks to you, Allie and Angie, and thanks to everybody who joined in here.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.